Welcome to the Nomad Futurist Podcast, where ideas shape the future and visionaries redefine what's possible. Join us as we dive deep into the evolution of technology, society, and human potential, spotlighting the voices driving change and reimagining our world. Connect with us and join us at media.nomadfuturist.org. The future is a story we write together. Let's kick it off. Here are your hosts, Phil and Nabeel. Hello. Welcome to Nomad Futurist. This is your co-host, Nabeel Mahmood, calling in from Waikoloa, Hawaii.
This is your co-host, Phillip Koblence, calling from Montclair, New Jersey.
Hi, my name is Bryon Price, and I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Zimmerman, and I'm in Chicago, Illinois today.
Brilliant. I think we've got pretty much all the core corners of the United States covered.
We need someone from Alaska. I don't know if you have someone you can dial in. But that's it.
Brilliant. Well, Bryon and Stephanie, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We have been working together as a strategic partner with you guys in developing content for the data infrastructure space, primarily to address the human capital deficit. But before we get into all of this, let's take an opportunity to introduce yourselves at a very high level as to what you do in your current roles and your organization. So, Bryon, let's start with you.
Sure. So I started my career in Navy nuclear power. So it did 8 years, and that basically programmed me. That's the way I like to describe it, is you come into the program as a high school student who doesn't know much, and you exit the program, and all of a sudden you're able to operate inside of a data center environment. So what I do is I work for JLL, and I'm trying to find and create technical knowledge for each individual that works and executes to contract for JLL in a technical capacity. And data centers is one of those areas where I focus a lot of energy. It tends to take a lot more to ensure the competency level expectation is met for each client and each situation. And so I spent a lot of time figuring out how do we do that in the most efficient way, but also in a way that ensures that the risks are removed and that we've addressed everything for the client and we're able to execute everything that we promised contractually.
Brilliant. And how about you, Stephanie?
Yeah, so I lead HR for our data center segment here at JLL. I started my career many years ago as a teacher, actually. Yes, I taught middle school and high school. And due to some personal reasons, I needed to make a left turn on my career path and moved into HR because I had some pretty transferable skills to do that. And I've grown in my career to the point where I really focus from a data center perspective on the full human being of an employee. So their employee experience, ensuring their financial well-being, their physical well-being, their mental well-being, and everything associated with that. And so data centers really resonates with me for so many reasons, probably the top two being that we have a lot of folks with transferable skills looking to learn more about data centers and how can I get into data centers and grow within data centers. As somebody who went through a career transition, I have a lot of passion for that and really helping folks recognize how do you make that jump from what you thought you wanted originally to a new path that's revealed itself. I also have a lot of passion around employee experience. I think for a lot of years, data center engineers and other roles based in a data center were oftentimes overlooked or forgotten because people didn't know about them or didn't understand them. And so in this role, I have a really cool opportunity to make sure that they get all of the same love and attention that any other employee in any other job or asset class receives. And those are probably the two things that really get me out of bed in the morning and make me really excited about the data center space in particular.
So to be clear, when somebody has a complaint about Bryon, they come to you.
Yes, they can. But nobody complains about Bryon because of how amazing he is.
But if they did, you couldn't tell us. So that's exactly what you would say. I let the record show that there would be no difference if there were complaints on Bryon. I have one complaint on Bryon, which I just discovered now, which is if we were doing the does your LinkedIn headshot represent who you are? Like, I feel like Bryon's LinkedIn headshot was taken maybe the day he started JLL 25 years ago. And it's not necessarily, by the way, I like this version of Bryon better. So my complaint is that it's not as handsome as the real thing. You're, Stephanie, in particular, it is a fascinating journey as the parent of a middle schooler and an elementary schooler. I can't imagine how you stayed for 1 second. As a teacher, I say this to their teachers all the time. I can't believe you choose to do this for a living. It is nutso, although they seem to behave better for their teachers than they do for parents, which I learned. But I totally get the concept of understanding the psychology of people and trying to kind of work with them on a very human basis, which I think is a lost art in the way we describe jobs and focuses. So you started at Citibank, and then obviously you have evolved in the human resources role, even within JLL, to the data center world. Is there something you've discovered that's unique about HR with respect to data center digital infrastructure people versus people in other roles? Or is it essentially the same kind of experience?
And even for that matter, industries as well. You came from a banking industry to the mission critical space.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I really appreciate that you've asked it. I would say there's a lot more similar differences because people are people. Everybody wants to feel valued. Everybody wants to reach their full potential. And those are things that are transferable no matter the job, no matter the asset class. Everybody wants those two things, which I think is really important to remember. Again, for folks working in a data center and who are operators, that what they do is really, really important. And I think sometimes it goes forgotten or just unknown because it's not as popular of a career path. Kids don't go to college or to trade school and go, I want to be a data center engineer when I grow up, simply because they don't know about it. It's not because they don't want to do it. They just simply don't know about it. And so I would say in that way, there are a lot of similarities. I would say probably the primary difference that I've noticed of all the industries I've had the ability to work in is that the folks working in the data center industry, no matter what their role is, engineer in the white space, IT services, so on and so forth, that natural curiosity, I would say, is higher than maybe some of the other asset classes. And I think that's such a necessity in the data center space because things are evolving so much more quickly than in other asset classes. Technology that exists today didn't exist 2 months ago. Technology that exists tomorrow that they'll need to understand how it works, how to utilize it, will exist tomorrow that didn't exist today. And so that natural sense of curiosity is something that motivates them. It is not a component of frustration like sometimes we see in the other asset classes where it's like, I just want to continue to do this the way I've always done it. It's a gear, it turns the way a gear turns. And so that drive for innovation, that motivation of natural curiosity, I would say is far more prominent in data centers, which makes working with data center employees really, really fun as well.
So going back to one of the things that you mentioned earlier, the ability to transfer skills, you're actually a great example. As a matter of fact, both you and Bryon are, and we're going to lead that into you, Bryon, as well. So you started your career, and as a matter of fact, you went to college for social sciences. And then you became a teacher.
Yes.
And then you got involved into banking, HR, and finally into the data center space. If you were to go back and identify maybe 3 to 4 skills that were easily transferable and or added value to your current role and help you accelerate in your career pathway, what would those be?
That's a great question. Didn't prep for that question. So off the top of my head, I would say asking questions. For some people, that sounds like, well, duh, of course I'm going to ask questions. But I think some people don't feel empowered to ask questions, or they feel judged, or they have fear of reprisal for asking questions. I think that's such a necessary skill for people to have, is to feel that empowerment, to know what the questions are that you should ask. So I would say that's a hugely helpful skill that has gotten me really far, is just asking the question. If you don't know the answer, just ask the question. I would say relationship building, that ability to have intellectual curiosity, emotional curiosity, and empathy has been really transferable. As I mentioned, no matter what industry, no matter what job, people want to feel human connection. They want to feel valued and appreciated. And so the ability to form relationships with other people has really gotten me a long way, no matter the industry that I have been in. And if I had to pick number 3, I would say the ability to research, which kind of relates to asking questions. But if you don't know the answer to something, the ability to know what resources are available, especially now with AI becoming so prominent, nobody expects you to know the answer to every single question, but they do expect you to know how to find the answer to that question, to the person to go ask, to the resource to utilize, to the playbook that this might be referenced in. And so for me, I would say those are probably the top 3 skills that has allowed me to really transition from job to job and even industry to industry.
Brilliant. How about you, Bryon? You've got certainly a very interesting career. And for starters, thank you very much for serving. And there seems to be a common trend over here that we've got a significant number of nukes in our sector. So, of course, there is the common denominator in the story there. But walk us through a degree in business management to serving in the Navy as a nuclear propulsion manager or something, whatever it is. I already messed up the title there.
Thank you for your service and whatever it is you did, whatever.
And then that transition over to JLL in the mission critical environment.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. And honestly, I have to give some credit to the Navy nuclear program for kind of giving me some insights. Obviously, when I was younger, I didn't understand process. I didn't understand how to get things done from the ground up. And I will give credit to the Navy nuclear program. Man, they teach you and they take you for the first 2 years of your enlistment. You're in school, you're studying. And just because that happens doesn't mean you go to the fleet and you're ready to operate a Navy nuclear ship. You still have to qualify. So to be fair, I joined a commercial business. I didn't go nuclear. I went commercial, real estate. I was working at a company where I had to learn from the ground up the way things are operated in the commercial world. And there wasn't a standard process for learning at that time. I won't date myself. And by the way, Phillip, I have earned every gray hair. And you're right. I'm sure my date and my photos are all dated. I try to keep them that way. That way I don't age somewhere.
I think I can count on one hand the number of gray hairs in that picture.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. I've gotten a few more.
Very Chuck Norris. It's got a very Chuck Norris look to it.
Thank you very much. To be fair, so all the years that I've been learning, and of course, Navy nuclear, again, I go back to the process. Like I learned how to learn. That was probably the most important thing that I got from that whole process. It's how do we ensure that we know what we're doing when we go and perform work? What's that process look like? And obviously in the military, they have the benefit of giving you 2 years to prep, right? 2 years of school, then a prototype, and they've got really cool tools. And you get in the commercial world, yeah, we maybe have some training. We may have in the past, we typically would farm that out to contractors. Nowadays, it just simply, we need to have a much more robust way of doing it, right? I think that's one of the reasons why I think this partnership is so important. We need the prep. We need to have some measure of training before somebody starts in a data center career. And then we can pick up with someone who has some experience and knowledge and then, oh, okay, you already get it. It's kind of one of those moments. Oh, you get it. You're working at a data center. Things are critical. There's a lot of things that go into this. We need to understand where we start, and then we can build on that. And that's how we approach it. And I think the way my military career and the Navy nuclear program, I've really kind of took the philosophy of that and kind of embedded that into how we measure competency. And then how do we report that back to ensure, hey, is everybody ready to do the work? We can't afford to have you there doing it if you don't know. So how do we validate that? And I also think about back when I first started doing it, and I'd stand in front of the equipment and look at it. And I'm talking about the commercial side, but also nuclear power. When you first started, it's daunting. It's very complex. It's got so many things going on, UPSs, switchgear, transfer switches. And if one thing is not right, thinking about PLCs, for example, the logic that goes along with it is very complex and different. Every system is different. How do I operate that? How do I ensure I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing? That is a tough question. And that all comes through a process. How do you learn it? How do you get to that point where I've got it? I understand exactly how that works. Sometimes it's not going to be very easy to find. You may be working with a vendor. You may be working with somebody who designed the system in the first place. Manufacturers, but that knowledge is transferable, and we need to find where is that knowledge and how do we get to it. So to answer your question, Nabeel, every step along the way has kind of prepped me to validate that process, ensure that we know exactly how to do it. And at the end of the day, we're able to report that back and say, give confidence to someone who owns those data centers, who owns the clients that are working inside those data centers. How do we give them confidence that we're doing what we need to do? That's tough. That's really tough. They've got a lot riding on the line.
I'm picturing a young Bryan Price standing in front of a PLC, like a MacGyverish, red wire, green wire, blue wire. Like, which one do I cut? Which one do I cut? And what the ramifications of which one I cut. When you entered the Navy, did you have a preconceived notion of what you wanted to do? Like, as you were going through high school, did you have any idea that you wanted to work with critical systems? Did you work with technology at all, or?
It's much dumber than that, Phillip. It's much dumber.
Oh, I'm sure honestly, it is. The leading question. I know where it's leading.
The most simple of things I said to myself, as I'm a complete nerd, chess club, band, that's me in high school. As I approached the Navy, I'm like, this is all that went through my head. What's the toughest thing you got? That's all I asked. What's the toughest thing? And at the time, it was the Navy nuclear program. I knew I wanted to go Navy. I don't know why. It wasn't the Air Force or any of the other branches, but for some reason, Navy appealed to me. And when I asked the question, what's your toughest thing? What is the toughest? Oh, Navy nuke, but you'll never qualify for that. You got to pass these tests. And then if you pass the test, then about half the people that enter the program, well, at that time, I don't know what the stats are now, but back then, half the people that entered the program don't pass and they become conventional. So you're not even a nuke. You go conventional at that point. I wanted to test my boundaries to see what I could do. And so, yeah, that was it. That was the whole logic that was in my brain. Give me a challenge.
I can't imagine our listeners aren't wondering, like, what did you play in marching band?
I played it. Bass clarinet, a big instrument. Yeah. Stand right next to the drums, right in front of the drums. So even today, I can hear the cadence of the drums. I don't know what it is about that whole experience, but just locks in your brain. It's amazing.
You can tune things off then.
I play the drums in my head all the time.
So Stephanie, a young Bryan comes to you out of Navy nuke or what have you. And as you're going through the process of trying to determine if they're a good fit for a position, are there certain things that you're looking for in a background that aren't prototypical? At this point, there's so many AI for templates for putting together resumes, and people just trying to figure out what you want to hear, but you are the people person. So what do you try to uncover from the young Bryan who is too dumb to know what he wants to do other than something hard, and try to determine what they're the right fit for?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I have this conversation with a lot of folks, even who are further along in their career. We all go through, I think, that moment of, is this really what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing? Maybe I want to do something different, or maybe there's a new job that didn't exist 20 years ago that I'd actually like to go do. So I have this conversation with people of all ages, all stages of their career. And for me, I really like to understand who that person is. Like, I want to get to know their personality. Who are you authentically? Who are you genuinely? And I like to ask the question, tell me what you like to do. Tell me what you don't like to do. I feel like so often people are so focused on, here's what I want to do. I want to go be a social media marketer, or I want to work in a data center, or I want to go be a doctor, or what, insert career here. But they don't often think about all of the things that are associated with that role that perhaps they don't actually like to do. If you want to be a doctor, but you actually don't like reading science articles, you just like being in front of patients, well, being a doctor probably is not the right career path for you, because they're the big part of that job that you actually don't enjoy doing. And so for me, I really like to get to know the person. Tell me a little bit about your background, and then I'll go into, tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. And from there, we can really open up the conversation of, here are jobs that'll give you the opportunity to do these sorts of things. If you like to work with your hands, if you like to do research, if you like interacting with people, if you like working in formulas and Excel spreadsheets, but then tell me what you don't like to do so we can continue to narrow that funnel of roles to say, this might have been a fit, but here's why it's probably not a good fit. Why don't we take a look at this job family? Or why don't you go speak with this individual and see really what their day in the life looks like? So for me, that's really where the conversation starts.
It's one of those things where like the resume, once you get past the kind of top of it, which is name, address, and whatever, and the bottom of it, like just where did they go to school, maybe what they're majored in, maybe that informs something. The rest of it is all just kind of, it's not that it's fluff or nonsensical, but until you have a conversation and there's a back and forth, it's really impossible. I think people get so frustrated because they submit their applications for these roles that they want. And they try to figure out, like, what can I say that will stand out? And inevitably, the thing that stands out every time I've had a hiring thing has been the complete nonsense, nothing on the resume, but maybe something on a cover letter or an email or just some affect that you picked up on that's like, that shows some level of individuality or personality or something that you can glom onto that says, this might be a person that would fit into the kind of culture of innovation. Who cares about what your experience, the experience that you already had? It's certainly meaningful to a small extent, but ultimately it might be more of a hindrance in the evolution of your career than it is informing whether you can succeed in your future career.
I tell people when I have conversations about this topic, I tell people, and it's a bit jarring the way that I'm about to frame it, is a resume does not get you a job. People look at me like, what are you talking about? Every job makes me apply with a resume. A resume gets you an interview, and an interview gets you a job. Because I don't know any of us on this call or listening to this podcast that would look at a piece of paper and go, you're hired. You're it. I trust you to run the data center. That's not how things work. The resume, to your point, is important to go, okay, do you know what a data center is? Have you ever worked in a data center? Do you have an understanding of what a UPS is? That is what then gets you the interview or the conversation to say, let me tell you how I actually learned what a UPS is. And let me tell you about my journey from the military to college to my first data center role. And it's uncovering, to your point, all of those cultural components to say, yeah, when an industry that's not going to look the same in 5 years as it does today, I trust you to have the tools and the ability to come on that journey with me and be successful in this environment.
The way, just last thing, how you could tell it means nothing is once you reach a certain stage of your career, it's an odd question to ask. I had this thing that I was doing where somebody asked me if I had my resume because they were vetting me for some board role or something. Like, do I have a resume? Like, it didn't even occur to me. Like, I don't know what that is. You schedule a phone call and we'll see if I'm a fit. But the idea that I'm going to list like, okay, I was a camp counselor and then I started a company and then 30 years later I did something else and let me write all the things that I did in that, it just doesn't make any sense. It is an inevitable entry point as a kind of data kind of checkbox. But ultimately, once you get that kind of first role and you get your feet under you, if you're doing the right thing, it's probably the last time you'll ever see that resume or even reference the resume because it's just not, it's not something you keep pace with. As evidenced by the fact that Bryon will have 3 Navy nuke, spent a couple of years at US Bank, and then JLL, and I earned all these gray hairs.
So Stephanie, adding on to what Phil said earlier, I mean, yeah, sure. So the human element is important to have a conversation and understand what their background is and if they're actually able to communicate. Being a very technical organization or sector that we are, part of the challenge is that most of the engineering force are introvert and they potentially or probably don't really have great communication skills, or they might be using some sort of a large language model to rewrite their CV. What's the ideal way to get through the system to actually have that initial conversation? Otherwise, they can be sending in hundreds and thousands of CVs or resumes globally and nobody gets a call. And the reason why I bring that up is because I recently was in Texas and I had a conversation with one of our partners, and this executive had been doing it for 24, 25 years. And she couldn't even get her own son and nephew a call back from her own HR.
Wow.
And that's mind-boggling. So how do we get these people knowing, might as well, that we've got deficit as of this year?
Yeah.
Roughly about 300,000 jobs that need to be fulfilled. And from the numbers that I'm seeing, if we get to 15, 16,000 jobs, that would be a big achievement. The scary part is that by 2030, that number is 1.6 million jobs, not accounting for the exodus of all the gray tsunami that's going to be happening between now and then. And then you start adding that to the 2050 outlook, it's absolutely ridiculous. So, of course, a long-winded question. How do we get people through the tool sets that we've developed so we can actually have these one-on-one conversations, at least be able to speak to them? And secondly, is HR equipped with enough technical skill set and knowledge so they can steer the conversation in the right direction and engage the right folks within their organizations?
Yeah, it is a great question and several part answer to your several part question. So in terms of how do we get these people in front of the right audience for that conversation that's going to lead to an eventual job offer, relationships go a really, really long way. And it doesn't mean that you need to be the direct relationship holder. If someone in Bryan's network goes, hey, Bryan, I saw a role at JLL. I'm really interested in it. Is there somebody you could connect me with? That goes a really long way because over many years, Bryan has built a lot of trust and a lot of credibility. And so if Bryan comes to me or any of our colleagues and goes, hey, here's Sally or Joe, they just want to know more about the job. Would you mind a 15-minute conversation with them? That goes a really long way. I think the other way is to use the technology of all of these applicant tracking systems or ATSs to your advantage. So one thing that I oftentimes recommend is look at the job description. And if you've done that bullet point, write that bullet point into your resume because that's what recruiters are looking for. It's what hiring managers are looking for. It's not a test. This is not a standardized test that you're going to get penalized for cheating. If you've done the job, we want to know that you've done the job and that you've done, even if it's not an identical skill, but you've done a version of this, again, in another asset class that is transferable to data centers. We want to know those things, and the systems and the recruiters will pick up those lines and go, oh, that's worth a conversation because I want to understand that more and I want to explore it further. To answer your second question around, does the team have the ability to assess things? Certainly, I can't speak for what other organizations are doing, but at JLL, we really value diversity of thought and experience. And so we purposely set up our interview process where a recruiter has enough to be dangerous. They understand what a UPS is, and they know what a crack is, and they know some of these basic terms to be able to snuff out, are you looking at an AI prompt right now trying to answer me, or do you truly have this experience? But then we bring in a well-rounded interview team where we might not have that experience. I'll be the first one to say I can walk into a data center and I generally know how it operates and what goes on there, but I don't have the technical experience or chops to really sit down and say, can you be an operating engineer? Can you be a critical facilities manager? I really rely on colleagues like Bryan and some of our other very trusted employees to say, you do this for a living. Can you spend 20 minutes with them and really tell me, do they have the necessary knowledge and ability to learn what they need to in the future? And so I also think that's really beneficial for the applicant and candidate as well, because just as we're interviewing you, you're interviewing us too. You're making a decision to say, is this the person I want to work for? Is this the culture that I'm going to be proud to be a part of? Is this the environment I want to go to every single day? And I think it's a really beneficial process where we can embrace that diversity of thought and experience because on the same way, we're doing that on our side too.
Right. So now steering it a little bit more to you with the ever increasing reliance on data infrastructure and our sector. What are the most pressing challenges that you encounter in training people within your organization and the next generation that's coming on board as operators and engineers?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges, to be fair, Nabeel. I think the most intriguing are probably those involved with people who want to job hop a lot. It takes a long time to get somebody ready to operate any single site. They're all different. So as you approach the site and you learn it over time, once you become a trusted operator, you need to stick around, stay here because we need you, right? And so we do a lot to ensure that the individual feels comfortable, feels like they're part of our culture, part of our home. You have a home here. And the hardest part, I think, is when it's not about the work. For a lot of individuals, it's about the pay. It's about the just, I want to go home at a specific time. It's not the work that matters. It's only one thing. And so therefore I job hop, right? I keep looking. I would recommend it. And I hope that we can ingrain a culture of like, you feel like this is your home, right? And you want to stick around, and not just with this company, but any company. And I say that culture where individuals want to learn it, right? Get in there, but then they immediately go and look for another job. That's probably the toughest part about what we do. We talk about the silver tsunami, but for whatever reason, past generation, like we go back 20, 30 years, the idea of job hopping, I think Phillip was even joking about my resume being very JLO. It's like, well, because I have a culture inside me where once I feel like I'm home, I'm home. And I think that's probably one of the most important challenges that we need to face, is trying to make people feel like they're home. Like, this is what I want to do. I've learned it here. Let's continue to grow your career. Let's build you up. And if you want to go somewhere different, like you want to be a site manager, or you want to run the program, or you want to run training, for example, that's an opportunity. We can work you towards it. But yeah, to your point, Nabeel, yeah, it's extremely challenging when you get somebody that you've trained up and they're ready to go. And then that's
the reason you're so comfortable is because Stephanie has done her job. Good work, good work, Stephanie, on creating a culture.
I think you bring a great point. Like, I mean, look at most of us. We've been in the space for a decade, if not more. Phil's been with the same company for 25, 26 years. I've been in the sector for 25 years.
29.
29. Yeah, I wasn't going to age you out. And Stephanie, you've been doing this for a decade, give or take, as well. At the core of it, there is, relatively speaking, from other sectors and society being very non-committal. I believe our sector has actually got that level of stability that people do typically stay within this space in some way, form, or shape. How do we get this narrative out to the broader audience that the sector is really committed to its people and there's plenty of opportunities, and we're the only sector for that matter that's got the opportunity to go into different sub-verticals? You can be in HR, and then you can be in banking or finance, or you can be in design, build, operation, or whatever else sub-vertical there might be. How do we get the narrative out to the broader audience?
I'll jump in for 1 second, which is that there are two different questions here. One is, as an industry, how do we create the narrative that this is an industry where you can take the benefit of your kind of individual characteristics and apply them in any direction based on that sub-vertical? The separate one is, to Bryan's point, like, how do you as a company create a culture that makes someone want to stay, where they can continue to grow in their career? And I'm reminded, as Bryan was describing the answer to the previous question, of the old adage of, what if I train someone and they leave, versus what if I don't and they stay? And I think you can't have this fear of someone leaving, because, to Bryan's point, if someone leaves because they're only chasing the shiny object, then there's nothing you can do to kind of deal with that. But it is incumbent upon us to create a culture that makes them feel as though they can continue to excel in their career. But I'm sorry, I cut you off, Stephanie, please.
No, that's great. I certainly invite Bryan to build on this as well. So from an industry perspective, I think we all have an obligation from an education perspective, and that can be done in so many different ways. It can be done in strategic collaborative podcasts like this one, and so many other ways, in getting on campuses at various schools, high schools, etc., and just simply doing the education around that this is a job path. Because I think a lot of people latch on to career paths that they see and experience growing up as kids. And because of the secure nature of a data center, most people just don't know what a data center is. They think the cloud literally is the cloud. They don't realize it's actually a building full of servers and equipment. And so I think as an industry, and all of us professionals in that industry, we have an obligation to educate on the stability, the security, the growth, every opportunity to achieve ambition that you might have. And further, I think that exists in educating all of the support functions, to Nabeel's point, that exists within the data center environment. I think a lot of people look at a data center and go, well, I don't really want to work with computers, or I don't really like engineering. And that doesn't mean that you can't be in the data center space. You can be a finance partner, because you still have to run a P&L. You can be an HR partner because these are still human beings who need care and support. You can be a salesperson because we still have to go build a product and sell that product to other organizations. And so from an industry perspective, to answer really that first part of that question, I think regardless of the fact that we may have competing products, as an industry, we have to come together and really commit to this education of others around us and others who are just starting to learn about and make decisions on career paths.
So, Bryon, for starters, thank you so much for the collaboration and the partnership and leading the charter with the Nomad Futurist Academy as well. Can you share at a high level of where we've taken from your point of view and how has it been thus far in helping develop the content to demystify the technology for the masses and encourage the young generation to come in our space?
So thinking about how we approach this partnership or this strategic plan, I think this project we're working on with Nomad Future is extremely powerful. What we're trying to do is we're taking some of the hard work we've put into our technical development program, and we want to make sure that we package it up in a way that gives someone exactly what we need when we're looking for a data center person. Okay. We wanted to give them a minimum set of knowledge that you would expect from somebody who's maybe got some experience in data centers, maybe been working in a data center. But the training we're providing through the Nomad Futurist Academy is meant to align, and it's 20 hours of training that gives you everything you need to understand the work we do, the equipment that we're working on, the technical expertise expectation, some of the process, right? How we get from understanding the procedures and understanding the equipment and understanding commissioning and some of the data center centric things that go into everything we do as a business, and then putting that to practice through testing and through training. And then at the end of it, it looks like you get a certification. So that certification will be basically your ticket to say, hey, I'm ready to start a career in data center. And we basically put our blood, sweat, and tears into ensuring that it is what we need. It is what the industry needs overall. And I think it's an extremely cool thing that we're able to do this free of charge. Like, it doesn't cost individuals attending the academy anything. I think that's a really, really cool opportunity. And if you look around the industry for what it would cost to get a certification similar, it's very expensive. And so I really think this is a great opportunity.
And like you said, starting with roughly about 20 hours. So, but it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of hours. And the conversation that we had earlier, that the world is changing by the second. So one of the charters that we've got for our platform is to ensure that we stay up to date with any changes, modifications, and as the technology evolves. Stephanie, from your perspective, when and if we can develop these career pathways? For instance, the four of us sitting over here came into this sector purely by an accident, not really knowing what the future is going to be like, with zero pathway ahead of us. We had to carve our pathway. Like Phil said earlier, him or I actually don't even know what a CV is. I don't think we've actually ever written one. So with the next generation, if we can leverage and eat our own dog food by developing the career pathways, give them education, tools, resources, and a direction. And of course, we can capture a lot of information from external public information platforms as well. If that candidate comes to you with digital tokens of certificates of completion of certain tasks and activities, and you've got their biodata of like what they learned, how they learned it, what their retention rate is, even the happiness index, kind of opportunities and jobs and pathways they're looking at, are they potentially going to have a better opportunity to engage with teams within the HR and potentially be directed in the right direction? Or is there another way that we should consider or entertain?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think that folks come to us in all different ways, and anybody who has an interest in data centers, regardless of their background, quite frankly, should not be turned away. To your earlier comment, the gap that exists from a talent and human capital perspective, quite frankly, does not give us the luxury to be picky about who we can and cannot accept in the data center industry. And further building on one of Bryan's comments earlier, we want this industry to feel like home for people. And of course, we prefer that JLL be their home from a data center industry perspective, but there is so much room for anybody and everybody who has an interest in data centers in whatever capacity. If that's being an HR business partner like me, if it's being a finance manager, if it's being an operator, a manager, a construction manager, an electrician, take your pick of what that looks like. In every capacity, there are career paths today, and those career paths will be further built out tomorrow. I really liken career pathing to train tracks, where you may get on at a particular station and you might ride that train to the next station, which is your next job change. But eventually you will come to a crossing, right, where you need to make a decision. Am I going to continue on the line that I was already on? Am I going to get off and switch lines and potentially move from HR to construction management, or construction management over to commissioning, et cetera? And I use this metaphor specifically because in data centers, the train tracks aren't finished being built. There are still stations under construction. There's still track being laid, because the evolution of this industry is going to continue for years on end. And so I hope that answers your question, perhaps in a different way than you were looking for an answer. But I really want to drive home that point that if you have an interest, we want to talk to you about it. We want to build out what that looks like for you in the future.
One thing that I want to really come through here is that, of course, obviously, JLL is a huge partner of ours in the Academy. So it would be odd if the HR department of JLL did not appreciate the fact that somebody went through the Nomad Futurist Academy when looking at these things. But one of the core tenets of it, like when we started this initiative, the idea was we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to bring the industry together and essentially be the connective tissue that aligns a society, certainly kids and folks in transition and students of all ages, and potentially Army folks that are looking to get into the commercial workforce, et cetera, and an industry that desperately needs them. And I think JLL specifically, because what you're doing is you are essentially operating these sites on behalf of all of the hyperscalers that everybody reads about in the news that are growing by leaps and bounds. You have no choice but to make sure that you have this internal documentation and ability to keep with the times. So instead of us trying to reinvent it and say, Nomad Futurist is taking a direct stake, and by ourselves, we are going to scrape the entire internet and chat GPT our way to a platform, a partnership like this really suggests that we are creating a situation where the industry is kind of eating its own dog food. And it is an incredible effort that Bryon and his team have gone through to try to kind of uncomplicate the hundreds and thousands of hours of content that you guys have that you use internally to make it consumable by a kind of general population. And the idea that, of course, ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to bring people in and create the leaders of tomorrow. But worst case scenario, an entire society that is pathologically addicted to technology is going to know just a little bit better how it works. And maybe, just maybe, they won't turn into maniacs when the internet goes out for a second, or their computer decides to reboot in the middle of a Zoom call, or whatever happens. And so I think there's just so much value in what we're doing. And the other thing I want to throw out there is one of the cores of it that I think makes it super unique is this community and kind of mentorship element to it. You don't have to take our words for it. You're not taking these courses and modules in a vacuum. You actually have the ability to communicate and interact with the authors of this content. So if you want to be like, Bryon, I don't know what you're talking about here. Bryon is there. Bryon is part of the Academy and the platform, and you have the ability to kind of have this built-in mentorship element that is so important to all of our careers. So if you go across the Nomad Futurist podcast, the one common thread across everyone is that at some point, somebody took us under their wing and provided mentorship that allowed us to gain the confidence to move on in our careers, whether that was internal to JLL, since Bryon has been there for 500 years, or take a career pivot from being a school teacher to getting into HR and coming in. And I think that community element of it, as we start really getting the adoption of the academy and introducing it into schools, which will only be helped by adding content to it, that's going to really take hold, where we're really helping folks try to determine where they fit in and put actual outcomes together with a desire to learn. So I'm not sure what the question was in that thing, but just thank you so much for everything you're doing. And it's not like I hope we'll make a difference. I am absolutely positive that it has already made a difference and will continue to make a difference with all of your effort.
So Bryon, leading into that and looking ahead, how do you see the integration of some of the emerging technologies like AR, VR, influencing the future of data center training and operations?
Yeah, that's a tough one because every new technology that keeps coming out, and by the way, some of them are really cool. We mentioned virtual reality, for example. Augmented reality has been around even a little bit longer, but really, really cool technology that can be integrated into everything that we do. Many different ways to deploy those technologies. And to be fair, I think our industry has a long way to go to perfecting the art. Every way that we can convey the best practice approach or the best knowledge or the best way to get it done, that tool needs to be explored and at some point shared. So if we're talking about virtual training, I think I've definitely been thinking about this a lot, many years, even created a platform for us to test and play around, a little playground, so to speak, in virtual, where we did some testing, said, hey, is this a better way to learn? And unanimously, it is. It's a better way to learn, especially with the technology getting better and better, new versions of headsets, tracking your hands and making everything feel more visceral, like you're really doing it. If we can do that, and we can have that as be part of the training experience, then we can essentially build safe environments to train and learn about data centers where you're actually pushing the buttons, where you're actually turning the switches and you're seeing the gauges respond and everything. All of that, you can build it inside of a virtual environment and it can look exactly like the equipment you're working on out in the field. So Nabeel, I personally think that there's so much more we need to explore and technologies that don't exist today possibly coming. And I think AI, I can't even say enough about AI. AI is, I think we mentioned it a few times on this call. If you take AI with a measure of a competent data center person, making sure that what the AI is saying makes sense, because you have to teach the AI. And every time we learn something that, hey, maybe the AI didn't quite get it right, we teach the AI, hey, you kind of got it wrong a little bit. The AI gets better. So if we keep doing that, I imagine AI, give it a few years. My goodness, it's going to be amazing. And if we integrate in the data center environment, we integrate with that technology properly, and then use some of the other technologies like augmented reality and virtual reality in combination with AI, the tools we could build could change the world. Definitely.
Very good. So we are big advocates of exposure, education, and experience, right? Resulting in opportunities and careers. And for that, we both Phil and myself, we are very thankful for the strategic partnership or the alliance and contribution to develop and demystify content to encourage young people and other generations to come into the space as well to address the deficit that we are so deep into. What would be some of the key takeaways that both you, Bryon, and Stephanie would want our listeners to take away from this brief conversation and engagement that we had today?
I would say definitely participate in the academy and make sure when you come looking for work, explore some of the stuff you learned inside the academy, because it's going to make a difference when you apply for these jobs and you apply for the work. And if you do have any questions, please reach out. Like I think Phillip said it, right? I'm here. If you want to talk to the person who was instrumental in the creation of the academy topics, then I'm here, and reach out if you want to talk.
And how about you, Stephanie?
I will build upon that. And I encourage everybody, no matter what you like to do, what you want to do, what you don't like and don't want to do, check out the academy, because that will help you come to those conclusions and help you determine what you do and don't want to do. And there is a place for every single person in data centers, no matter what you do or don't want to do. If you want to be an HR, finance, an engineer, a construction manager, etc., we have a place for you. We want you. We'd love to embrace you. It starts with that academy, and let's take it from there.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. This has been absolutely phenomenal. Like we said, the deficit is getting bigger and bigger by the day. We've got a lot of opportunities in our sector, and we are the fastest growing sector ever in the history. So Feel free to join us. Check out Nomad Futurist Academy. And Bryon and Stephanie, thank you for your time and contribution. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Nomad Futurist Podcast. Remember, technology, markets, and challenges will continue to evolve, but those who adapt and prepare are the ones who will thrive. Embrace the change, stay curious, and let's build a future worth moving towards. The journey has just begun, and we're glad you're here with us. Visit us anytime at media.nomadfuturist.org to stay connected and be a part of the movement. Until next time, keep exploring.